Hello, everyone's first focus. The season's over, so it's time to reflect and dish out some awards, which will hopefully show just how good it all really was for Nottingham Forest. So, joining me today to give their awards, first of all, is Michael Temple. Temps, how you doing?
Good, mate. Have you got awards as well? Are me and Pete up for anything?
No, internal ones. Oh my God, that's a real Sophie's choice. Favourite contributor and all that stuff. I don't know. I mean, most hungover would be a battle between Pete and Greg, I think, after seeing the vlog on Sunday. But no,
I'll take healthiest breakfasts.
We'll make it happen. It'll take a year to go out the prizes. Pete Blackburn, how are you?
Yeah, all right, thank you. Happy to be here. Feel a bit confused that it's the end of the season now. Everything was gearing up to that, and suddenly it's all just done. But yeah, I'm good.
Good. We'll expand those emotions a little bit more. Like I say, the lads will give out some awards. I'll chip in. I've got all the nominations as well from everyone else involved in the podcast. So Mikey, Pete, Greg and Mark, and then the regulars who are on the post-match show as well. This is recorded, not live because of half-term time management. So drop your nominations in the comments as well, and I'll have a look at those after and see what people are saying. It'd probably be an interesting pool of names. They're quite condensed, but it does show how good it's all been. So, but before we do that, I'm feeling a lot better today, Pete Blackburn, after feeling pretty miserable, certainly on Sunday and yesterday. Saw your face, stood the row behind you, looking pretty ashen, frankly, as the players are going around for their lap of honour. How are you feeling today?
Yes, similar sort of transition as you, I guess, sort of just about coming around to it today. And for the purposes of doing this pod, I spent a bit of time, I won't put any hours on it in case my employer's listening, but I spent a little bit of time looking at the various highlights through the season and remembering that it wasn't all about the day on Sunday and that we'd had so many good times. So that pulled me out of my stupor. I was putting a brave face on it on Sunday at the pub after the game, trying to tell everyone it was all fine. We'd had a great season, all that sort of stuff. And then I woke up yesterday and thought I'd been hit by a train. It was I was certainly not fit for human consumption and absolutely miserable, very flat all day. I think probably partly just because we've come to an end of something that's, been a sort of a real dream and journey for so long now. And I guess that's a bit natural. Also, I think I was struggling with having seen Chelsea celebrating on the pitch when they're just such an unlikable mess of a football club. That team that they brought looked totally uninterested for the first half and had me totally believing that we were going to get a famous result and it was going to be, one of the best evenings of our lives. And then they get that horrible little goal. Chris Wood can't quite do what he's done for us all season. And then we're watching all of those totally unlikable lads and the variously classlessly hoarded expensive toys assembled by oligarchs and venture capitalists and whatever they are. Just a horrible, horrible football club. And I really, really resented having to stand there to wait for the players to come back out to thank them for all their efforts because, it felt like my duty to do that. But having to watch that did leave a big old seed of bitterness, I think. But yeah, much better today. Happy to celebrate what the players have done this season because it's been amazing. So it'd be great to chat about some of that stuff.
Lovely. I don't think Temps will have the same view of Todd Bowley as you do, but I do hear what you're saying. We haven't spoken about that Chelsea factor of them celebrating on the pitch. That was one of the reasons I stayed because I wanted to see that and remember how awful it was, and hopefully it'll make when we finally do get to where we want to go, it'll make it all the sweeter. But it was painful. What about you, Temps? How are you feeling?
We left on the whistle, so I didn't see that Chelsea time their run and we faded away. So I think what will be my enjoying memory of the season, it'll be the joy I felt 6-7 weeks ago when we seemed to be cruising to the goal. And I know a lot's been said about the fact that we take these results in a different order and this outcome, but the way professional sport works is that goals are adjusted. You set new targets based on the situation you find yourself in. And when we beat Man United, the coaching staff, the players, they had a set of goal. They were expecting, wanted, hoping, working towards top 5. And they'll be extremely disappointed with the manner in which we finished. I don't want to take away any achievement because the group of players that got us here played beyond their capabilities. It was just an insane level of consistency at times that got us into that position. But with hindsight, going into those final 4 home games, knowing how few points it would have required to get us to where we need to be, and ultimately to have taken 1 point from 12, is the reason why we find ourselves in the Conference League rather than the Champions League. So yeah, a fantastic season, and yes, so many results against the head, so many players playing at a level that they weren't fancied to reach before the start of the season. But I am still slightly disappointed that we didn't make the top 5, having got ourselves into such a commanding position. But the boys earned that. Nobody let anybody down. It was the sum total of tiredness, of mental fatigue, of physical fatigue, of playing with injury, of carrying knocks, of just trying to get out there, patched up week after week after week. And they did us proud in so many games this season.
Lovely stuff. Like I say, we'll get into some awards that will hopefully show how good it was. I'm going to do what I often do and ask Temps to strip off, because I can hear a little bit of rustling on his headphones. So he can go in another room and do that if he wants, or do it on camera, whatever. But we'll go to the awards. They will say we've got Player of the Year, Most Improved Player, Goal of the Season, Game of the Season, and marks out of 10 for the season as a whole. Right. Player of the Season, we'll go around the room and then we'll do what everyone else said at the end. But Pete Blackburn, Player of the Season for you?
Well, I was just checking my phone because I definitely didn't realise there was a Game of the Season category. So I'll work on that one as we continue the recording. So sorry, Player of the Season. I mean, look, I imagine all of us feel like we've got to say before answering that question. It could be one of 10 or however many. Some seem incredibly obvious, but I think it goes through pretty much the majority of that. What we consider our starting lineup, I guess. I've just about. I mean, I've really changed my mind throughout the recent sort of days and weeks, and even this morning as well, trying to think about this. But in the end, having spent a bit of time thinking about it and going through those highlights and looking back through the season, I personally felt like it was difficult not to go with Chris Wood. The things that he's done to turn almost nothing into something for us over and over again, with absolutely crazy relentlessness. It's been wild. And you think you could say this about a lot of players, but it's pretty clear we've been nowhere near the sort of journey that we had without that contribution. And I guess the way we talk about this sums up the brilliance of the team. It really is a team effort, isn't it? But I think Chris Wood has outperformed everything to be the one who can turn the draws or the defeats into more points. So many moments, that swivel and turn finish at Leicester. I've almost forgotten about that. It feels like so long ago. All the times he's just in the right place. The preciseness of his movement, it can be just a tiny little moment where he pulls back or makes the little dart, and it seems to be the undoing of really, really high quality defenders. He's deft, he's adaptable, he's ruthless. He's none of the things that I thought he was when we signed him. I've eaten endless amounts of humble pie, and I hope that we can continue to see more from him, because it doesn't look like he's going anywhere right now. But yeah, to do 20 goals with an XG of 13 odd really sums things up. I think he's the one who has taken us from a point tally that perhaps we should have had to one that really, really gave us a chance on the last day. So I felt like I had to go for him in the end.
That's interesting. He was mine as well, actually. So I thought people would go elsewhere. But yeah, for the same reasons, a 20-goal a season striker for me would cost an absolute fortune. And he's probably certainly in the top 5 Premier League strikers, Haaland, Salah, if you count him, Isak, Wood. And I guess you throw in Burma in there as well for scoring 20 goals, even though he's not a striker. So yeah, for me, I don't think we would be where we are without Wood, perhaps above all others. But there was certainly 3 main contenders for me, along with Milenkovic and Sells would be the others. But what about you, Temps?
I was Chris Wood. I think we've kind of gone against the grain, haven't we? Having polled a fair few people, Nikola Milenkovic seemed to be the popular choice. I think he won the official club award. And from the perspective of a signing having an impact and a team that was 17th becoming a team that's placed 7th, he's the obvious change. Chris Wood carried his form from the back end of the previous season into this one, though, and won so many games. He's on fire for his country as well. Those treks to play international football aren't insignificant. He comes back, makes himself available, and just maintains that consistency throughout a year in which Forest have punched well above their weight. I think if he'd have just nicked in front of the keeper and kept that first half chance against Chelsea a touch lower, he might have polled another 10-15% of the vote if people were assessing his impact on that particular game. And there were a few games towards the back end of the season where he didn't find the efficiency, the ruthlessness that had earned us so many points earlier in the season. But to achieve 20 goals, to win so many games for us with his contributions, and I think as well, just what you hear about his leadership, his conduct around the group, and the manner in which he trains, performs, plays at the age he's at now. Chris Wood got my vote, and I think it's entirely deserved. Notable mentions to Milenkovic and Sells, who would have completed my top three, but so many wild cards in there as well. I think there'd have been votes for Ola Reiner if he'd have played a couple more games. I think Elanga, Hudson-Odoi, Gibbs White, the fact they're in the kind of second tier of the runners and riders for this award shows just what a collective squad effort it was. How many players really did themselves no end of favours with their performances this season, but goals changed games, and Chris Wood was our top goal scorer this season.
Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. Just before we move on to most improved player, a word for the Trent Navigation. A reminder, 14th of June, 3 p.m. till 8 p.m, a daytime gig. Sex Pistols expose with DJ support from Lee Nicholson. Get your tickets by scanning the QR code on screen or go to fatsoma.com. And I guess you search the Sex Pistols expose or the Trent Navigation to get your tickets for that one now. Right. Most improved player. I think that was definitely on your list, Pete Blackburn. Who are you saying for most improved player?
Again, I think it says a lot about the season that I probably had 6 or 7 choices for this one too. I was very close to saying Elliot Anderson for player of the season because he's fast become my favourite Forest player. But I thought it was probably a few that pipped into that. So I've gone for Elliot Anderson as my most improved. I mean, I guess there's an extent to which this is most improved compared to what I and maybe we expected we were getting. But I think it's probably also most improved because he's a player who came to us, I think, with very relatively little expectation that he was going to suddenly become a real core part of the team. I can't speak for him, but certainly for fans, and I think the club as well, I don't think it was expected that he was just going to walk in there and take hold of that position by the scruff of the neck. And, you know, he spent all of the season really debating who was going to play in those central midfield roles. But it was very rarely up for debate whether Elliot Anderson was going to. You know, when he first came to the club, I think he was on the back of a fairly difficult injury and obviously not being a regular at Newcastle. So I think he struggled with playing 90 minutes for a little while, as I recall it. And now you look at him and he's a player that you can rely on to go from beginning to final whistle. And I think, as I said, he's fast becoming my favourite player at the football club because he just feels like he's got everything. You know, we signed someone for a frankly ridiculous amount of money when you take into account the transfer going the other way of Lakodimos. You know, I thought he was going to come here as backup, as cover, as potential to take over from Gibbs White or to fight Hudson-Odoi for a spot on the left or just do a bit of everything, really. But I mean, this is a guy who can do everything in that central midfield role. You know, and when you see him up close as well, if you're ever in those sort of frontier seats at Forest or away, he's unbelievable. You know, the strength of an ox. He's got 2 feet, can play the ball in any awkward situation. You know, you give him in a tight situation and he'll take 2 players out of the game and get himself out of it. Passes with real purpose and vision, carries the ball with a proper swagger. He just looks like a player who could be anything to me. And if you'd have told me that at the start of the season when we signed him, I wouldn't have been like horrified and, you know, I wouldn't have been surprised out of my skin because I remember I think it was me, you and Mark doing a pod when we signed him, Matt. And I remember specifically Mark and I both being very excited about the potential of the guy. But it was potential we were talking about back then. And now we've got a ready-made England centre midfielder as far as I can see it. And I mean, that feels like a pretty significant improvement.
Yeah, I remember you and Mark being super high on him, especially Mark. You know, Mark loves the numbers, and they were certainly there to suggest he'd be good. What about you, Temps?
Well, most improved for me is Matt Sells. I think there was still a bit of debate about the goalkeeping position back end of last season. He had the Danny Welbeck free kick incident and one or two others where he looked slightly less than assured. Sure, a competent Premier League goalkeeper, and he was within a slightly more leaky, a far more leaky Forest defence at that point in time. But to flip from that to win the Golden Glove and to be talked around about in the same breath as the very, very top keepers in the Premier League shows how far he's come. I think he could be courted by other Premier League sides who will see the manner in which he's coped with high pressure games this season. The high profile incidents of salvaging, saving wins for us or clinging on for draws, just so many big moments and so many game-saving moments that he's found himself in the mix for. Of course, he's benefited from being behind Milenkovic and Murillo, and I think that unit, when Williams and Aylmer played as well, has served us so well. Honourable mention to Nico Williams. I think he's come a long way and established himself now as more of a classic fullback. We signed him when we were a 3-5-2 side and earmarked him for a very, very different role. He had a bit of a turbulent time and had to relearn his craft as more of a fullback in a four, be a little bit less adventurous. But the manner now in which he still brings the best facets of wing-back play, whilst being a solid one-on-one defender, so much more comfortable on the ball, gets in my honourable mention. But I'm giving it to Matt Sells. I think he's been truly excellent this year, and he's emerged from the pack.
I had Sells as well for mine, just for the reasons Temp says. Like last season, he was steady and he was fine, and he wasn't Matt Turner, so that was decent. But this season, he's really kicked on. I just looking how old he is. A bit older than I thought. 33, he'll be 34 halfway through next season. So I guess that's roughly peak years for keepers. I don't know, or he's just coming out the other side of it. So feels like he's in a good place. Maybe one or two more years at the very top for him. But yeah, definitely for me, that was the first name that came to my mind. Let's go back to you, Temps, for goal of the season.
Goal of the season for me is Callum Hudson-Odoi's winner against Liverpool at Anfield. I think it just summed up how we played. It was a turnover ball on the edge of our box. Gibbs White out to Anthony Elanga, uses his pace to get us up the pitch, threads an incredible ball between fullback and centre half to get Callum on it, favoured position left side, tucks inside the fullback, uses the centre half to screen the keeper and finds the corner. It was a pivotal goal, got us the win at Anfield, and I think just summed up the manner in which we were trying to play. No one had quite worked us out at this point, but that goal just typifies the reason we caught so many big teams cold and accumulated as many points as we did. So goal of the season for me, Callum Hudson-Odoi at Anfield.
I had two definites, and I know everyone else's answers, and they're all pretty much the same. So that one or Elanga v Man United. I also loved Chris Wood's one v Everton with the 1-2 header and then lobbing it over Pickford. That one sprung to my mind. But I feel like it's the Elanga one, just because of how fast he ran with the ball. I won't elaborate on it too more because I know quite a lot of people would have picked that one or the one Temps mentions. But my vote went to Elanga. What, anything different for you, Pete, or one of those two?
No, sadly not. I mean, I think the Elanga goal was just an insane moment, and it basically was a moment, wasn't it? I vividly remember watching it happen and then turning to my friend's dad and just saying, "What on earth has just occurred?" It was basically a split second, and suddenly he'd beaten everyone and slotted it home. But no, I went for Hudson-Odoi versus Liverpool. I won't add to what Temps has said about the goal, but I think part of the reason why it sticks with me now is that it really does feel like it speaks for the season as a whole. There's a moment of individual brilliance, not only from Hudson-Odoi, but also from Elanga with the ball he plays to get in there in the first place, which is absolutely beautiful. But also it feels like a real team thing, because in the context of the game, it was the first time I think I felt like we were a really serious proposition, like we had a proper plan, we had a man behind the plan, and that everyone was bought into him and his plan. Something was starting to stir there. Nobody moaned on that bench. Hudson-Odoi and Elanga were sitting there and understandably would have been pretty unimpressed with not being in the starting lineup, presumably for a big game like that. and we packed the midfield and we stifled them and we suffocated them and we defended for our lives when they broke through those lines. And then we unleashed the boys from the bench. I just think so much of that speaks to what was great about Forest this season. And it just felt like a really special thing. And then, of course, to do it in the backyard of the old enemy with all that history, it's perfection, I think.
I'll kick off game of the season because I think it's a pretty left field one. There's only me and Chris Aylmer that went for the same one. I picked the Man City at home game, partly because I was there, and I think that makes such a huge difference being there. Obviously we've got an international audience who don't get to go to many games, but just watching games when it all comes off is pretty magical. And that was a game where, we really established or made a statement that we can beat a top team. I know they weren't a top team then; they've probably become one since. But a real contender and a real team that's had, had our number. We think back to the 6-0 game, which when the Yates and Worrell were on here, they both reference has been a chastening experience. And then to be able to beat them in 2 years, in a league game, fair and square, was fantastic. And it's sort of another great Nuno tactical plan. And when Hudson-Odoi scored, that was pretty incredible. So I went for that game. If I'd been at other games like Anfield or Brighton, I might have picked them. But it was Man City at home for me. What about you, Pete?
Well, Brighton was obviously an absolute joy. It was just sort of a ridiculous spectacle, really. Playing against a team that appeared to decide not to field a midfield, and then we just ran riot, and it was sort of hard to believe from the stands as the goals just kept happening. I think that it does feel special because it's a pretty blooming rare thing to score 7 goals in the Premier League. And thinking back, the last time we did something like that I was there for, I forget if it's happened much since, was that the Swindon game, I guess in League One. I think we won 7-1. And when I think back to the players on show there and the opposition and such like, it doesn't quite stand up to beating a properly established Premier League side in Brighton. But actually, I think, having heard you talk about it, I think I'm going to go for Leicester away. Just as more a sort of sentimental thing, having been there. I've not been to very many away games in recent years for various reasons, and being at that game, seeing us take apart the local rivals that we had in this division, and just feeling like, I remember at the time we were always talking about how we've got to keep going. Can we go to a difficult time because they're going to be desperate to beat us? And all, it was a different challenge each game, and it just felt like we were sort of putting away those challenges. And to see Ryan Yates do what he did, I mean, that's pretty magical, isn't it? We'll always have that memory now of Ryan Yates sweeping it into the bottom corner away at Leicester, and the absolute scenes and the limbs. And it was just, I think I'll go for that. Pretty special to be there.
Good, lovely answer. What about you, Temps?
I had a great day out of Leicester. I think in terms of atmosphere and our dominance over them, and the Steve Cooper chance, that was a great away trip. Certainly the best fun I've had on the road this season. But the Brighton result gets my vote, not only because of the manner in which we played, but because we're bouncing back, having lost 5-0 the week before. We need a reaction. So Chris Wood hat-trick was in there. They were completely demoralised by the time that Nico and Jota Silva added those 2 late ones. But it was just the perfect way to discredit those that had written us off after the 5-0 defeat the week before. We were just about ready to catch fire at that point. I mean, some of the sequences of results, I'm just glancing here, but some of the sequences we put together were truly astounding. I think consecutive wins in 7 matches from the 7th of December to the 11th of January will stand out. But 7-0 at home. It's been a while since I've seen such a one-sided game, and our opposition just unwilling or unable to make pretty obvious tactical changes, which we just ruthlessly exploited. Just put our foot on their throat and kept on pounding away. So really, really proud of the manner in which they bounced back in that one. And for me, that has to be the clear winner for game of the season.
Last one for these lads before we go through everyone else's. I hope this is the one that is the kind of the perspective award that shows how good it was marks out of 10 for the season. So Temps, you want to kick us off with your marks out of 10?
It's a 9 out of 10 for me. And it would have been a 10 out of 10 if we'd finished top 5. And the reason in which I don't allow Forest to achieve top marks is simply that. For 10% of the season, we let the prize slip between our fingers. And the prize was Champions League football. If we could take 3 or 4 points from our final 4 home games, and we fell away for the reasons I mentioned earlier. But there's not too many teams have had a 9 out of 10 season in the Premier League. Liverpool, obviously. Arsenal are resourced and should be able to compete up there. Chelsea, Man City have timed their runs but fallen short of the levels that they'd expect. Spurs' season was rescued by the Europa League. Man United, that's less than 1 out of 10 season for them. The Championship teams have gone with the form book and found themselves relegated at the first attempt of trying to stay in the Premier League. So Forest punching above their weight more than anybody else in the Premier League this season. But it's a 9 from me because I know what their goal was at a particular point in the season, and they just failed to cling on to a top 5 spot.
Yeah, that's interesting what you say and how you calibrate it. I mean, if you were saying teams that have had 9 out of 10 or better seasons, then to me, it's us, Liverpool and Palace. And I think that's probably shows how good it's been. Pete was shaking his head there. We'll come back to Pete in a sec.
Say Newcastle, it feels a bit.
Oh yeah, Newcastle. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. I would throw Newcastle in there as well. Villa would have been if they got top 5, but yeah, Newcastle winning a trophy. You're absolutely right. Of course, yeah. When you look back on it, like we've all discussed, all these great games, all these great memories. Not getting Champions League was really galling, but taking it all in context and throwing in Wembley as well as a bonus. The Wembley thing is the only thing that I look back on personally and kind of revise my take that when you see Palace celebrating that trophy, I actually look back and think now I probably would have rather won the FA Cup than even got top 5 because of what it's done for that football club and what it would have meant to us. So I would revise that opinion. But for me, a 9 out of 10 certainly. What about you, Pete?
Absolutely the same. Don't disagree with anything that either of you said. As I said, I sat down and went through so many of the highlights this morning. What a journey it's been. Yesterday, I was struggling to forget what had happened on Sunday. I think we all needed a little bit of time just to put that behind us, I guess. In hindsight, it just feels like the most enormous opportunity with everyone else having a nightmare and just us not quite able to do it on the day. But putting that aside, that's the only thing that could have raised the score for the lads, obviously. I was sifting through the memories made, I guess, while I was watching those highlights videos. And it's just been an absolute privilege, to be honest. It's been unbelievably special. I think I'll remember it fondly forever. And hopefully the coming years will bring a competition for those memories. But if they don't, and if this is the best that it ever gets, then it has been really special. We beat Liverpool at their place. We beat Man City at ours. We were there to see Leicester, Wolves given hidings on the road. As I said, welcomed a new star in Elliot Anderson, who might be a leader, the beating heart of the football club for years to come. I remember this team so dearly. Sells with his iron wrists when we really needed them. Chris Wood defying history and age and expertise. Murillo and Milenkovic, I don't think I've even spoken about them on this podcast yet. Those two holding back the siege, flanked by Nico and Aylmer with grace and great heart. Sparks flying from the boots of Elanga and Hudson-Odoi and Gibbs-White and his beautiful caressing of the outside of the right foot, which, we may not see it again, but we'll always remember it. So, yeah, I think, I would have been so delighted to give that team a 10 out of 10, and I give them a 10 out of 10 for heart and desire and for the culture and the spirit and the feeling of being involved in all of those things. But I think, obviously, we just fell short at the final hurdle. Which is no slight on anyone because the effort has been unreal, and it just told in the end. But yeah, for me, it's a 9. So close to being perfection.
Wonderful. You're going to full flow there. I like it when you really you round the home straight and then you go into a full sprint over the line. Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. Right. We'll look at everyone else's what they said and get some thoughts from these lads on what they've said and some final conclusions, because it will be quite interesting, I think. Just before that, a word of thanks for Home Move Estate Agents and Ben Sales. As ever, if you're looking to move house, sell, buy, whatever, check out the link in the description. And Ben's email is on there, 5-star rate on Google. And as part of his advert this week, he asked me to give a shout out to Alan Moore, who he was featured on the BBC, actually. He's been a City Ground turnstile attendant for 46 seasons, going back to 1979. He's retiring, and he asked me to give that shout out because he's a client of Ben's, and he wanted to recognise his lovely service. And his son, Alan's son's a listener, so shout out to him as well. Lovely story. Great shift for the club there. So well done to Alan. Right, let's go to what everyone else said. These lads haven't seen it, so they can weigh in with some opinions. Like I say, I got all the regulars to do it, the main regulars, and then the valued squad players who do the post-match shows mostly. Let's start with Emily Anderson. Player of the season is Milenkovic. Most improved, Nico. Goal of the season, Oleraina at home to West Ham, left foot thunderbolt. Game of the season, Liverpool away, marks out of 10, 9 out of 10. And I picked a kind of glitzy background for YouTube with some awards type shine there. So that's Emily. I'll do Greg next. He's been broken by Nottingham Forest. Player of the season, Nico Williams. Most improved, Ibrahim Sangare. Goal of the season, Hudson-Odoi at Anfield. Game of the season, Brighton at home. Marks out of 10 for the season, 7 out of 10. He said, I'm too sad to go higher. Let's cut in there. That's tragic, isn't it? Temps of Greg's been broken.
First team in history to double their points tally. Greg's gave them 7 out of 10 for everything they've ever achieved. I think every single one of Emily Anderson's awards were sensible, well-reasoned and measured. And Greg's gone completely left field there. I think he's gone a bit high on Sangare, who showed some glimmers at the end, but his body of work is nowhere near the level that one or two players have got to in terms of improvement. Nico, yeah, he's had a great season. He's not the player of the season. I think it's really, really tough for a fullback to prosper in that category. Let's let him off on Hudson-Odoi and Brighton at home, because we all concur with that. But to say that that collection of results is worthy of 7 out of 10 underlines two things. A, that Greg Mitchell still has that kind of boundless high expectation, and he has backed them more than anyone else from that point where we're bottom of the championship. But he still likes to drink. He still speaks from the heart, not the head. And he's so far off the mark with that one. I think you should ban him from Forest Focus forever.
A big call at the end. Oh, poor old Greg. Check out Greg in the vlog from Sunday. He was broken, but I don't know. I'll throw it to Pete as well, because I was totally stunned when I saw that 7 out of 10. It's a bit.
He'll change his mind on that. He'll come round.
He will come round, won't he, Pete? I'm sure. He's just very sad at the moment.
Of course he will. I'm not going to add to Temps because it was perfect and brutal. He's delivered that with Chris Wood-esque ruthlessness. Yeah, look, I'm not going to bury Greg anymore, because he's clearly a very vulnerable man right now. We need to rally around and take care of him, don't we? But I'm pretty sure he'll have that 7 up to a 9 in a few weeks.
I'm sure he will. I'm sure if Nottingham Forest can break Greg, then any of us can be broken by Nottingham Forest. Right, let's go to Mark Sutherns. Excuse me. Player of the season, Chris Wood, in line with us. Lovely. Matt Sells, most improved. Hudson-Odoi at Anfield for goal of the season. Game of the season, Brighton at home. And Mark went 9 out of 10. I'm glad he went 9 out of 10, because he got some flack for people saying he was a bit too down on yesterday as we record this with Kelv. But, as we take it as the round, then Mark went 9 out of 10. Last one for the regulars, Mikey. Player of the season, Milenkovic. Most improved, Oleraina. Goal, Ilanga at home. Game, Liverpool away. And Mikey, who also has a bit of a rep for being negative, went 9 out of 10 as well. Any thoughts on that? Oleraina most improved? Was he? That kind of suggests he wasn't so good last season, doesn't it? I thought he's pretty consistent. Temps.
Exactly that. I thought Oleraina was next level last season, and he stood out in an underperforming Forest team. So it was no surprise to me that he hit those levels this season. Tired, given the effort that he puts in. Does fade in the last 5-10 minutes of games, but so cool on the ball. Such a high quality modern fullback. Always finds the right option. Never panics. He's one of the best fullbacks in the Premier League for me. And yeah, Mark Sutherns, I think, agreed with all of my selections, and everything he does is grounded perfectly in stats and research, isn't it? So fair play to Mark Sutherns. Yeah, I think he's doing all right. A little bit of a disservice because I thought his 23-24 was excellent as well.
Yeah, it was. Poor old Ola as well on Sunday. I think he'd just gone. I think he'd lost his rag, certainly, and I think he was completely shattered by the end of it, which was a big shame because he'd done so well. And I think he'd been rushed back from injury. I always got that impression. But he put a real shift in all season, as did all the lads. Let's look at the post-match contributors who are very grateful for their help all season. Chief in Chicago, player of the season, Sells. Most improved, Elliot Anderson, like Pete. Goal of the season, Hudson-Odoi at Anfield. Villa at home for the game of the season, which is a good shout, obviously coming behind to win that one late on. Marks of the season, 8 out of 10. So slightly lower, but higher than Greg, which is all fair and reasonable. Chris Aylmer, sales player of the season, most improved Nico, Elanga at home, Man City at home, as mentioned for game of the season, a 9 out of 10 for him. Paul Morley is Milenkovic, the player, most improved sales. Elanga again, Liverpool away for a game, and 9 out of 10 for him. And then just two more, Ruby Naylor, sales player of the season, most improved Sangare, so Temps will be hating that. Elanga goal of the season, Brighton at home for game of the season, and 8.5 out of 10 for Ruby. And finally, Fothers, player of the season, Morgan Gibbs-White, the biggest Morgan Gibbs-White fan going, as we know. Most improved Elanga, goal of the season, Hudson-Odoi. Game of the season, Brighton at home. Marks of the season, 9 out of 10. I mean, is that a sackable offence, Temp, saying Gibbs-White, or is that too biased, or is that fair?
Fothers loves Gibbs-White, and yeah, he has. There's been games where he's absolutely shone, and sadly, I think he's earned his move, and he'll leave Forest having made us a profit, taken us from the place that he found us to the place that he'll probably leave us. But I think there's a lot more to come in his career. If he does indeed find himself at Man City, he could be pulling strings in far bigger pockets of space than he's allowed in that Forest side. I don't think he makes my top 3 of players of the season, despite me rating him extremely highly. And just on all of the Sangare shouts, he's only managed to start 7 games this year. And yes, we have had a bit of a window into what he could be if he could consistently find himself out there on the pitch. But to win that award or any award in this season, I think you need to have started 25 games plus.
Lovely stuff. Right. Just looking at some conclusions there, Pete. It's interesting. There's a few names and a few moments that really crop up, and it suggests a few players who really step up when they have to. And I'm thinking there of Elanga, Hudson-Odoi, probably the X Factor players that, you know, we hope are with us for a long time and can do further big things for the football club, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a hell of a season for Elanga in particular, hasn't it? When you think it, I mean, it doesn't feel like that long ago that you and I and a few of the people on the podcast were getting pelters for defending Elanga amid that the interest and the potential offer from Newcastle for him. And, you know, he was having a real sort of struggle with form and struggling to impact on games. I don't know whether there was, you know, injury and such like behind that, but it was, you know, it was a sort of slow start for him. But I think we've seen before what he can do, and he does have the real ability to make a difference in games. So I had a really strong feeling then that we should stick with him and that he could be proper X factor for us. And I sort of wonder what would be without him, to be honest. You know, the second half of the season, and certainly in the most recent weeks, pretty much every time I've watched Forest, whether at the ground or on TV, it's felt like, really, unless Elanga does something, we're probably not going to get through the game with a win. And I think that's how important he's become to us. You know, so often, really, it's been, how can we get Elanga in the sort of position where he can hurt the opposition the most? You know, he's played on both flanks. He's played up front close to Chris Wood. And certainly my feeling through the games has really been that, I'm watching him and just hoping that one of those bursts of pace is he's able to get away from the defenders and it's not a last minute challenge or whatever. And that, when he gets there, he's able to put it away, because everyone else has looked so tired and so burdened by, the pressure and the expectation and the relentlessness of all of it. And yeah, so I think that says a lot about Elanga. And I really hope that he's still here come the start of next season. He's one of those few that it feels like, there's potential for him to go if there's the right sort of interest and what have you. But I really hope he stays, because, we talk about the rebuild if the Gibbs-White exit happens, as lots of us are expecting it to. But I think the rebuild losing Elanga is big as well, because, as I say, he's just been the primary threat for a good while now. You take those two out of the team and, I think would have been well outside the challenge for the Champions League places in recent weeks. So yeah, that's
lovely. Temple Juniors are ready to weigh in, I think, in the background of the Thames's camera.
I think Shrek 2 might have just finished.
Oh no,
that's right. We'll let you go.
Not finished.
Just before we finish, then. I'll say, I'll throw it to Terence for his final thought. I think the Elanga thing is, Pete's right. Like, we've massively leaned on him against Chelsea as well. Someone's opening my door now. Oh, it's my son just dropping a bag of crisps in for no apparent reason. No. You're going to have to edit this probably now, or this will test my professionalism, see if I just put this out in its entirety, which I probably will do.
Surely I've one podcast interruption for you. I've had half the family on this in the last 12 months.
I think I'll probably just put this out in full, to be honest. Yeah, we really leaned on Elanga against Chelsea. You could see it. Everyone else was like, we can't do anything. It's not happening. Give it to Elanga. And it didn't happen from the day. I suppose the point I was going to make, Thames, is it probably does show the need for real, reinforcements, big moves in the summer. Much I've got a lot of time for Jota and Sosa, but it suggests that Nuno probably hasn't as difference makers. So there's some big moves to be done this summer, especially in the attack, isn't there?
Well, both in the 10 spot and out wide. I think if Morgan goes for the type of finance that's being discussed, then we shouldn't go and drop the same cash on a like for like number 10. I'd like to see us add to the depth. And that means having an impact winger or a player that can start in the absence of Elanga or Hudson-Odoi, who are generally going to miss games given the type of players that they are, the levels that they attain every week. Elanga's been a stat leader this year. He outperformed Morgan Gibbs-White in assists, I think 12-8. And was he one behind him on goals? Yeah, he scored 6 goals to Morgan's 7. I think we will struggle to replace Morgan Gibbs-White like for like. There's an opportunity to make the squad that much stronger. We've seen how important those injections from the bench can be, because we're in a different stage now. We're not trying to bring on a centre-half to settle for a draw. We're striving to look forward and to kick on and to make positive attacking substitutions. So the Morato Bolly type move, which was our classic sub from a year, 2 years ago, needs to be replaced by the player X coming on for Elanga or Hudson-Odoi, or Hudson-Odoi coming on for player X or Elanga, to make sure that we've got a different threat and a sustained threat in the last 10, 15 minutes of games. Because there's no sugarcoating the fact that we've weakened in the last 10 to 15 minutes when we've had to make those subs, because players are on their last legs, having completely exhausted themselves. But I wonder if we're going to look to make this Anthony Elanga's team, or find another 10 that can be the talisman, because we played an asymmetric one-winger system at home to Chelsea in a game that meant so much. He popped up on both wings at different points in that first half and became the focal point of the attack. And his record of goals and assists suggests that he can carry that burden. So really interested to see the changes that we make in the summer. But if Gibbs-White is to leave, I think it's essential that we retain Elanga and Hudson-Odoi and give them every chance of succeeding by having quality players around them and necessary backup that can help us to maintain our levels when the bench is called upon.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what we do. Even whether we do like a Newcastle 4-3-3 and something completely different with two big strong number 8 and a number 6, and it's going to be a really big summer. Pete, any final thoughts from you before we go?
No, I think Temps is absolutely bang on. I don't think Gibbs White leaving means that we're not tied to the current system, which you could argue has given us problems in other areas of the pitch at times. To be honest, I think trying to find a blend of two players to play that double pivot role with Gibbs White having such an emphasis on being creative further up the pitch isn't the easiest thing to do when you haven't got complete footballers in those roles. Maybe it's an opportunity to have a blend of three in there. Maybe it's an opportunity for Elliot Anderson to step up and do a bit more of the creative work from a sort of bustling number 8 rather than really playing as a 6, which I think probably does inhibit some of his instincts and capabilities. So yeah, as you both say, it's going to be absolutely fascinating. I mean, just as a general, I suppose, roundup, really, I think all I've really wanted with Forest teams over my time supporting is to have a team that does feel like more than the sum of its parts, where there's something a bit special going on there, where you've got a manager with a plan and a team of players who buy into it. I'm not desperately worried if they're the biggest names or any of those sorts of things, but I just want to see players who go out onto that pitch, give everything, and look like they're all buying into something together. And as a result of that, they become something better than they all are listed alone. I think we had that under Steve Cooper when we were promoted from the Championship, and it was striking because we hadn't had it for so many years before. Nottingham Forest had become a sort of a home, I suppose, to players wandering around waiting for their next contract, and for managers passing through from one place to another. And we suddenly got a sense of identity, and we got a team where everything was built around that little small group of players achieving everything they could and taking us along on the journey with us. It's a bit of a privilege to have had that once, to be honest, but I think even more remarkable that we've had it twice now, with Nuno taking over, delivering with a totally different set of players, much more high-profile names, and names who you could see going to other clubs, like, not to pick on anyone, but Callum Hudson-Odoi is a big-name footballer who's achieved a lot in his early career. And you can see players like that going to other clubs and it not all fitting together so harmoniously. But all these players have come together at Forest, and it's been a special thing. They really are better than the sum of their parts. There's never ever a doubt about what they're contributing to the side and whether they're really giving everything out on the pitch. It's a shame to have just fallen short of the hope and the dream at the end, but they've never fallen short in their effort, and they've always felt like that team that I wanted, that were more than the sum of their parts. So it's been a great privilege to watch them and to talk about them on here.
Lovely stuff. 2 monologues to pick from there for a social media clip. Gold star to Pete Blackburn. Player of the season is Pete Blackburn, arguably, if we were giving out awards, but we're not. Right, we shall leave it there. If you've enjoyed this, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe, sign up for membership. You'll get early access to any pre-recorded thing like this, or just give us a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. Plan is to be back tomorrow with Lewis, I think, get his thoughts on the season. And that might be it for the week. So, as I mentioned, it's half term. But we packed lots in, and do check out the John Percy interview, the Joe Worrell interview, Kelvin Mark on the season. And obviously, I hope you enjoyed this one as well. Michael Temple, thank you very much.
Cheers, fellas. See you next season.
Well, I'll see you before then. You've got a verbal contract to do it more than that. So we'll see you before then. Pete Blackburn, thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Looking forward to receiving my annual bonus in the post.
I'll give it you in person. Don't worry. We'll see each other soon, won't we? We're going. Is it next week? I think we're going to see Matt Ford, aren't we? Temps isn't coming, so he's a big letdown. But everyone else is coming. So
I'm going to see Shaggy and Pitbull, mate. I'm sorry, Matt Ford. I know you might occasionally listen to this, but unless you can create some kind of double bill that can eclipse those two, there's only one place I'm going to be, pal.
Who can compete with such names?
Exactly.
Not Matt Ford. That's unfair. I like Matt Ford.
Clearly not. Clearly not. Yeah, that'll be a good night out anyway for everyone else. Right. Thanks for your company today, everyone. Like I say, do us a favour and hit like if you haven't already. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.